right. Hello, everyone. It looks like we have admitted all of our people in the waiting room. So thank you all for joining us today. Hopefully you can all hear me. If you can't, if you're having difficulties at all, feel free to chat us and we'll try to figure it out with you. But my name is Tony Phelan. I am the Associate Director of Alumni and Parent Engagement. I work in career exploration at MAC and alumni engagement. And I'm joined today by one of my colleagues, Amanda. She's one of our career counselors in career exploration. Many of you probably know her. And then we've got a great lineup of panelists today for our Curious About Careers event in lab and bench research. So we're going to kick it off by having each of them do introductions. I want you to know that at any point, students, if you have a question, you can type it into the chat. You can unmute yourself and ask. You can kind of raise your hand in your square and ask. We can call on you, or you can use the raise your hand feature, whatever feels comfortable to you. And we'll try to get everybody's questions answered. At the end, I'm going to ask the panelists if they could share their contact information in the chat. It can be email, if you'd prefer LinkedIn, whatever you prefer, you can just share right in there so that students can follow up with any questions that they may have afterwards, or if we don't get to everyone. So with all of that being said, we are recording the session today, so just keep that in mind as well. It'll be shared with students who registered for this event. So let's start with our intros. Whoever wants to jump in, go ahead, and any of our panelists.
I can start us out. Hello, can everyone hear me? We good? Audio, okay. Hello, my name is Gianna Bortoli. I was a graduate from the class of 2019. I was a biology major and a women's gender and sexuality studies minor. While I was at MAC, I participated in a couple of the internships offered through the Olin Rice Hub, as well as some other things through the Career Center. I think you said it's called Career Explorations now. The first summer I had interned at a lab in Arizona. That was between my sophomore and my junior year, which was with a MAC alum. And then between my junior and senior year, I interned with another MAC alum at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And while I was in there that first summer, they offered me a full-time position as a research technologist when I graduated. So May of last year when I graduated, I packed up all my stuff and I moved to Baltimore by the end of the summer. And I worked in the lab as a research technologist working on a molecule called CAMK2, which is involved in heart failure. It's a cardiology lab. And it was a really great experience. And then I was really itching to move home back to Oregon, where I live now. So I actually made a career move and now I work for the state of Oregon as a case manager in human services, but I just left my job as a research technologist and as a bench scientist. So I have a lot of, questions I can always answer. So yeah, that's me.
I can go next.
Awesome.
So I'm Soo Kyung. Nice to meet you, everyone. I graduated in 2018 and I majored in biology, minored in chemistry. And while I was at Macalester, I did research with Professor Chatterjee in her lab. So summer after sophomore year, I did a summer research program through MAC with Professor Chatterjee. And then summer after junior year, I did like a short summer research internship with University of National Institute of Science and Technology in South Korea, because that's where I'm from. And after graduation, I got a job at Biotechne. It's a biotechnology company headquartered in Minneapolis. I'm in their Luminex department, and I work on developing our Luminex panels, which is a ELISA-based platform. So, and I've been working there since. Yeah, so that's me.
My name is Aman. Hi. I was class of 2016. I was a biology major and a chemistry minor, just like Soo Kyung. And most of my bench research experience at Macalester actually was through the University of Minnesota. So my junior and senior years, I I would actually drive down to the St. Paul campus at the U, and do lab research here. So that was about 2 years. In the summer before my senior year, I actually did an internship at Biotechne, as
Awesome.
as like a product like product specialist, so like talking to some clients, as well as keeping tabs on how products are being used, what the applications are, things like that. After graduating, I was a research technician for a year, again at the University of Minnesota. Um, and that was mostly done because I wasn't exactly sure if bench science was right for me. And through that experience, I loved it. It's amazing how different spending 10 hours in lab a week is versus doing it full time. And so that's really the experience I was looking for. The advisor that I was working with for this position encouraged me to apply to graduate school, and that was in 2017. So now I am a rising fourth year PhD student in the same lab at the U, and my research looks at studying peptide natural products using synthetic and molecular biology. I think that's all I'm going to say for now, and looking forward to questions.
Thank you all. So I'll kick it off with our first question. I would love to know what advice you have for students who are looking to gain experience while they're at Macalester. Some things that they could do to boost their resume, whether that's classes you recommend, internships you recommend, networking activities. What kinds of things should they be doing right now while they're in school if they want to go into this type of career path?
I would say that employers, whether it's like a big research institution like University of Minnesota or like a corporate lab like Biotechne, they know that students who are coming straight out of school, they're not going to have that much of a like research experience that are specific to the position they're looking for. So as long as you have the general lab experience and if you can show that you can apply the lab skills you've learned in school to the real the job, I think that's good enough, because I see that a lot of other students who are looking for a job asks me is that, oh, like I've only done like a general chemistry lab or like a cell gen lab. Would that be enough to get a like lab technician job? And I think that's like enough as long as you can tell them that you are familiar with the lab settings and then that you are like eager to learn.
Yeah, I can jump in on that. So if you are at all considering a career in bench science, and if being in the lab is something that is fun for you, I mean, the simplest, most obvious thing is like, get lab experience, see if it's right for you, build up those skills. And in my experience, the labs at Macalester were there just weren't enough labs to accommodate every student that wanted to do bench science. And so really one of the bigger points that I want coming from me is that the University of Minnesota and any of the other universities around are also great resources. If you can get to work at a lab at Macalester, great. It's right there. You can walk the lab, come in at whatever hours are required. But if that is not working out for any reason, email a professor at the university, look up their research, send them a nice email about how this is specifically what you're interested in. You read some of their papers. Start. I actually mentor 2 undergraduates, one of whom is a first year student, is a first year undergrad. And so to me, that still amazes me because I only started in my junior year, but even if it's your senior year, doesn't matter. You will get really good experience, spend as much time in the lab as you can, and you might even get a publication out of it.
Adding on to what Aman said, like if you can send out cold emails to professors at the U, but also what you can do is ask professors at Mac if they know any professors at the U, because I know a lot of friends who got into like a research experience at different universities through Macalester professors?
Yeah, I would say that my experience, I was saying that I actually got almost all of my I got all of my lab internships through the Olin Rice hub, which was really useful. And so something that I did was talk with the Liz Jansen, who is the head at the time, I think she still is, and talking to other professors, and they were encouraging. And I think it really helped that they knew I was really interested in those opportunities, and I had voiced my interest early and repeatedly. And so they knew that I was invested in going and kind of applying for these internships that were not even in the state, but they were still with Mac alum who were really interested in having students come and work in the lab. But I remember when I was applying for my first internship, and you're really scared, you don't have any experience, and you have to write a cover letter and you have to put on your resume, things like that. And I will say that I definitely highlighted the classes that I had taken at Mac that had lab experience and just talked about what exactly I had done in those. I had said, pipetting, things like so simple that like the products that we had worked on in the class, and given more in-depth answers to like maybe some of the more hardcore techniques that we have done. I remember even adding stuff from my biochem class, because my the second lab that I interned at Hopkins was more biochem heavy. And so I was talking about the experiments that I had done in biochem and things like that. So I think that just what you can do at Mac, if you really are scared and you don't have any experience, is to just really talk about the projects that you did in the class, because that's experience and you were doing lab work for that. So I would say that at Mac, that's something really good to do.
All right, students, I'm going to open it up to you all for questions. Like I said, you can type it in the chat, you can unmute yourself, whatever you are comfortable with. I'll give you all a second to think and get your thoughts together. And if there aren't any questions, I have some backups too. I'm not seeing any, but I have a question. How have you all used your liberal arts education in your current position? The fact that you kind of had a broad range of classes, how has that helped you in your careers?
I can speak first. So I was mentioning, and I'm sure some of you guys read in my bio, that my major was biology, but my minor was women, gender, and sexuality studies. And I was really excited and hoping to bridge those two, which I'm still hoping to in a more serious manner. But I think that I took a lot of WGSS classes that were even focused on bio-specific. I took a race, gender, medicine class, and I took a women, health, and reproduction class. And any of the history courses that I also took that were cross listed WGSS, I found extremely useful in terms of the research that I'm doing, right? I worked in a heart lab, but we know, and maybe we don't know, I guess in the heart lab, we know a lot more about cardiology stuff, but that, women are, the signs for a heart attack are very different in women than in men. And for a long time, science and like models didn't really reflect that. They didn't reflect gender as an indication of something that could be occurring differently. And so I think that was something that I was really interested in wanting to investigate more when I got my lab experience. And so when I was creating models and when I was creating experiments, that was always on the forefront of my mind. Like, how can these manifest differently in gender? And so there's a lot of experiments that we had in our lab that were using mouse models that ended up showing, okay, there is drastic differences in male and female, and how do you explain that? And the lectures that I went to and were really interested also were focused on that. So I think, to me, I really was focused on looking at gender and looking at just the classes that I had taken had kind of given me an introduction to like a broad understanding of what you can investigate. And then in terms of WGSS, and then I was able to, with my research, kind of investigate more specifically into cardiology. And I think that was really useful.
Yeah, I can add to that. So I guess for me, it would be three main points. The first is the science itself. Science at Macalester, as I'm sure all of you know, is rigorous. My GPA while I was at Macalester was not happy with me. And while it was happening, I hated it. But now that it's a little bit in the past, that was a huge blessing. I think the way that Macalester teaches you science is outstanding. And I can say that because I've seen students coming in from larger university settings. And there's something about those small class sizes, like professors checking in with you about like, hey, how's it going? All of that kind of stuff really does help. Just improve how invested you are in your own learning of science. So that's the first point. The other is the writing requirements really helped me. It's amazing how far you can get by being able to draft a coherent argument, whether it is in an email to a professor saying, hey, I really like your work, or if it's I'm writing a paper and I need to show my findings as best as I can. And so the writing stuff really does help at every stage in your career. And the last for me specifically has been the social justice angle. That is kind of something that you pick up at Macalester, whether you want to or not, and it really sticks with you. And I'm extremely grateful that happened. So I was just since the murder of George Floyd. I helped set up what is now called the Anti-Racism Working Group at the college level, and we have the backing of the dean, and we're forming panels with 12 members of the administration, undergraduate and graduate students, and postdocs, and we have kind of a list of things that need to happen. But the point is that recognizing and having the like the ability to actually sympathize with or empathize with social injustice is something that a liberal arts education gives you that you really should be very happy about.
All right, thank you. So we have a question in the chat from a student. Sarah is asking, how do you recommend finding a research topic you're interested in or want to pursue for years? If you have some research experience but didn't love the topic, what would you recommend doing to figure out the next steps?
So I'd say I'm still in the process of finding a research topic I want to pursue because I plan to eventually go to grad school and get a PhD in biological research, but I don't know which field. So something I've been doing myself is to just read scientific articles. Like, it might not be the most like fun thing to do, but you don't have to read the whole like paper. Just read the intro, like the conclusion, and see if it's interesting to you. Like, would you prefer more in like the genetics research or like more cell biology or chemistry, or like, are you like, there are some papers that might be more specific to a field that might intrigue you more than the others. And I think that's a good way of finding what intrigues you more. And another thing is that you don't have to go straight to grad school after Macalester or undergraduate. You can, like me, get a job at research lab or like a research lab. And some companies do let you do like a rotational program where you spend like a couple months in one lab and then another couple months in another lab with different research topic. So that's also something you can take advantage of if a company or research lab you apply for offers that. So I would say those two are the main things I'm doing to explore.
To add to that, this is more of a like cautionary tip, but it is an extremely important question what you end up choosing, because you never know how that might affect. It's kind of like the snowball effect of like, once you go down, let's say like cardiology, that is something that you start getting more and more interested in, and for all you know, like now you're like, wait, but like there's all these questions that need answering. I gotta go do this, and without knowing it, you have now gone into the field of cardiology, which maybe like when you first started off, you didn't know if I love cardiology or not. So I guess the positive side of that is you're always going to end up doing what you love. If you hate it, your heart's not in it, it's just not going to work. The negative side to that is that when you do pick at first, you really do need to be careful, like spend that time. It might take hours, it might take days or weeks. Really read multiple papers, see what are some of the, see what excites you. Like you read the abstract and you're like, huh, that's interesting. How did they figure that out? Or like any of those kind of questions, anything where you see some amount of curiosity coming up, that's one place to start. I'll stop there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what you were saying, because I started off in a cardiology lab, the first lab I ever interned in, and wasn't like completely sure that I loved it. But then I had the experience of working in a cardiology lab, so then I applied to another cardiology lab, and it was a different topic completely. And I just kind of, now I'm like all cardiology, so it's easy to kind of go down there. So I couldn't agree more with really trying to figure out what kind of field in the first place you're interested in. And I think they gave some really great tips about doing that. I will say though that sometimes when you're in the field, even, right, like I've been in cardiology, I've been in 2 different labs, and there's still questions that I am interested in terms of like gender that are involved with cardiology, right? So if you're, depending on where you're at and where you go, and like I was at Johns Hopkins, which is a huge institution, and lots of different questions are being asked in regards to cardiology. But so it might not always be available to other people at different institutions, but there's definitely questions in the field that you might not be super interested in that you can still answer that you would be interested in, if that makes sense. So I think that's important. But yeah, it definitely, initially, it's really, really important to think about that question before you start out.
If that seems like too much pressure, which it kind of is, but I will say that there are 2 times, if you go the traditional like academia route, there are 2 points in time where you can drastically change what your research focus is. One is when you're starting graduate school. So kind of like what Soo-Kyung said about rotations in like corporate America, you also have rotations in graduate school. So for my rotations, I worked in a proteomics lab that was completely different. I worked in a lab that studied cystic fibrosis, and I studied a lab that did synthetic biology. Those are all pretty different, and I could have switched tracks entirely at that point from compared to my previous research, and that would have been okay. So you can do that. The other time is when you're picking a postdoc, where you know you have certain skills and you're like, okay, I think based on what I eventually want to do, I need these other skills as well. And so then you try to find the lab that bridges those together.
And postdoc is the position that you apply to once you've graduated graduate school.
Yeah, thank you.
Some people, I know, the lingo is definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. All such great advice. So we've got another question in the chat that I'm hoping some of you can speak to. Can you talk about being an international student, navigating grad school and job searching?
So I'm from South Korea, and as an international student, job searching is definitely trickier than if you were an American citizen, because a lot of companies straight up say if you need or will require visa sponsorship later, they will not hire you. But there are definitely companies that doesn't care if you are an international student or not. And I guess it's just there are fewer like opportunities that you can apply to, but after that it's not so different. And I think it depends on your specific situation. So you can just, I'd be happy to answer more in details if you shoot me an email later.
Yeah, to add to that, so for at least for graduate school, the process is pretty simple. You're still on an F1 visa, which is the student visa, and the visa, your I-20, as the document that they say just transfer. So Macalester just has to change the name to University of Idaho. I don't know, and that process is simple. I didn't even have to go back to India to be able to like reapply or any of that. So that just transferred. That was really easy. And for job searches, I don't have too much experience. I will say that after undergrad, if you are in a STEM field, you do get the 1 year of your optional practical training and 2 years of I believe it's now 2 years for your STEM extension. So you do have about 3 years that you can really use to decide exactly what it is you want to do. Maybe like work in a lab for a little bit while you are searching for corporate jobs if that's your thing. I think that's been my experience.
I have a clarifying question just because I'm curious. Do you know if Macalester has some resource that talks about companies that are like willing to hire international students? Do they have a list? Or like
So Aman mentioned OPT, and that's the 1 year you can work after graduation. And if you have a STEM major, then you can apply for additional 2 years. And for companies that will support the additional 2 years after the initial first year of OPT, I'm blanking on the exact term, but there are companies that supports that additional 2 years, and you can look it up. You can go to the ISP. They have they don't have a list, but they will tell you how to find a list of those companies that do support the additional 2 years of OPT. And once you find a job, then applying like the OPT and stuff, it's not that difficult. You just have to apply. So that shouldn't be a worry.
Great, thank you. So we're getting a lot of questions in the chat, which is great. I'm going to maybe try to combine a couple of them that are related. We're getting some questions about applying for bench research positions after college, or technicianships, or whatever they might be called. What are some common position titles that you might look for that are common in those types of positions, kind of entry-level roles? Do you feel like most of them are posted? Do they come from networking, maybe a mix? What has kind of been your experience? And then when did you apply for those types of jobs, or when would you recommend applying? And I know that's a lot in one question, but any tips that you have related to that topic, just job searching?
Yeah, so you're not gonna like it, but networking for me anyway has been the way to go. I know I always hate hearing that from any career panel, but the research technician position that I got, so that's one of the titles that you might want to search for. One of those positions was actually the senior graduate student that I worked with as an undergrad recommended, or it wasn't even a recommendation. There was a new professor on that he had just met at the university in the same department, and I had told him like, hey, I'm gonna be looking for jobs soon. Can you see if there's anything that you know of? And he just dropped in a word saying, hey, I worked with an undergrad. Like, you might want to just talk to him. And at the time, who is now my current advisor, didn't have any. He wasn't looking to hire a research technician, but he agreed to meet with me in any case. And something about that meeting changed his mind. So if it wasn't for that, the job didn't even exist. If it wasn't through that network. So that's definitely one important point. And I like to think of it more in terms of like how many like degrees of power you have. And so if you need to be able to find jobs like that, networking is the way to go. Maybe there's a professor that you formed a really good impression on. They can contact someone that they know. But if it's contacting someone they know, it might not be exactly the kind of research that you like. So that's one level lower in terms of the like power scale. But then you can use that position maybe a year later to find your next position where you have a really good recommendation letter, and you have that bench experience, and now you can go into exactly what it is that you wanted, that you're interested in.
Yeah, so some position titles that I know of are research technologist, research technician, laboratory technologist, laboratory technician. And so there's weirdly like the same thing for both. Yeah, anything like that. To get some more ideas, I think the best bet is to look at research universities' career pages, because they usually post a lot of them, and then you can see like what the different job titles are that they use at that particular university. I also hate to say that networking was also how I got my jobs. Or it's a good thing too, because they were all Mac alum. And I think that that's also really valuable, is reaching out to the alumni community, because there are alumni who are doing research at labs, especially labs near Mac, and other cities if you're interested in moving to new cities. I know that when I was at Hopkins, there was another student from Macalester, the same class, that had also gotten a job in a lab at Hopkins, and so we were able to like meet up. I saw her on the bus a bunch, and she was telling me about how she got hers through more of an official apprenticeship kind of 2-year program. Oh, that's another thing. The NIH has a lot of 2-year programs after graduation, which is really useful, and you can apply to those. One of my friends is in those now, and he honestly, like when he was doing it, he looked up labs that he was interested in working in, and then he just emailed them and was like, hi, I'm really interested, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And they got back to him, or they didn't. He mentioned he was applying to the program. They also ask you to like look at them and talk to different advisors or labs to see which one might best fit you. But things like that, really reaching out. Labs, my position also didn't exist when I was applying to it, and it just so happened that they really liked me and they wanted me to come back for the full year of research to do it full time. And it's also, like Aman was saying, like really different than just a little bit of time working on long-term projects. But they also created that position, and it took several months to kind of figure that all out. So the connections and reaching out, but also there are apprenticeships or like internships at certain universities. I know the NIH, I know Hopkins has one, and I think there's a couple of others too. You can probably look online.
So Adi, I believe what Gianna mentioned, I think it's called Postbaccalaureate program at the NIH. I think, a lot of my friends are doing that. I think it's a great program. But anyways, a lot of the position titles, I think one position title I saw a lot in corporate labs are research associate, and that is my current title. And I can only speak for like big corporate labs because I didn't even apply for any like research institution positions. But in corporate labs, research associate is a common entry-level position title. And if you just go into like careers page, you'll see a bunch of titles. And then if you just click one that is like research technician, research associate, you will be able to tell if it's an entry-level position title, because the qualification will say, oh, like 0 to 1 years of lab experience, or like 4 years of bachelor's degree. So that's one way of knowing which one is the entry-level position title. And so as for networking, I am the odd case that I did not get a job through networking, but I would have to emphasize networking is very, very important in job searching. So I didn't get my current position through networking, but I know that in a lot of corporate lab positions, if you can like name someone from the company in your cover letter, or like in your initial applications, you automatically pass the first round, and then you get the chance of interviewing. And I actually talked to a lot of Mac alums in bigger like pharmaceutical or biotechnology companies, just to like know what the company like work environment is like. And they also like gave me some insider tips on like what the company culture is like. So regardless of whether you get a job through networking or not, I would like to say it's very, very important.
Also, in the question, it also asked like what the timeline looks like for bench research applications. It can really depend. Sometimes they're looking for someone immediate. Sometimes they're like willing to create create a position title for you. So it really depends. I think that if you're looking, I mean, just a regular job timeline, a couple months out, like more than like 2 or 3 months out, just to get a feel for things. And you can always tell them, oh, I'm graduating here and then. People are usually pretty understanding. I do know that there's sometimes either at the beginning of summer or at the end of summer when students are leaving and they're hiring for like the full school year. Those are good times to be looking in particular to see when they're hiring. So, or when students are leaving to go to medical school or start grad school in a different lab or things like that. Times when the school year starts are a good time too.
Thank you. Great tips again. So we've got a question also about grad school specifically. So how much, well, one question was, how do you kind of go about choosing an advisor and looking into that? But then also, how much of your time do you actually spend doing research versus writing papers or reading papers? We'll start with that one first, because there's also another side to this question. So we'll start with that one first, just kind of grad school. And I know not all of you are in grad school, but if you have anything to offer on that.
Yeah, so I can start. So I love this question. I think it's an extremely important one. Picking your graduate school, I would say, is almost easier than picking your advisor. And the reason I say that is there's a lot of great graduate schools around the country and around the world. And if you are at a school that you have heard good things about, you can't really go wrong from there. So that's the grad school part. I mean, applying to any, even like public universities, the University of Minnesota is great. Any of the like bigger, whether it's like, I don't know, Michigan, Wisconsin, Madison, any of the UC systems, any of them on the East Coast, they're all great. And there's so many more I haven't even named. So that part is easy. For picking your advisor, I would say, I think of that as like picking your lab. And the way that I've been taught this is there's 3 things that you have to think about. One is your advisor themselves. So are they a good person to talk to? Do you get along with them? Do you agree with their leadership style and how they mentor you? There's the lab environment. So what are the other students in the lab like? Do they really do you get along with them? Do they not really like each other? What's going on there? And the third is the science itself. And are you super passionate about the science that you're doing? And they say that if you get 2 out of 3 of these, you're in a good spot. I would say try to get all 3 of those if you can. So when you meet an advisor, see how they see how you feel, put them in the context of the other students in that lab and the science itself, and try to rank them based on that. Use that, and that should definitely help you out. With the second question about how much time do you actually spend doing bench research, 95% of your time is spent doing bench research, because that's really the most of it. Writing proposals, there will be times where you spend 2 or 3 months even writing a bigger proposal, and that's fine. Those are more like concentrated bursts. And reading papers is something that happens every day. You'd be amazed how fast you get at reading papers in graduate school. Or I mean, even if you've just been doing it for a few years, like 10, 15 minutes and you've got the gist of a paper. And so that's kind of something that just happens all the time in the background. I don't even really like allocate time for it.
Yeah, I will. I'm not in grad school, but I think that what you were saying about the lab environment is really, really important, because I saw a lot of experiences in different labs at Hopkins that were just really terrible. And publish or perish is real, and lab environment can be very toxic. And I was really lucky to be in a really amazing lab. But I think it's really important for you as someone who's interested in the lab to interview the lab too, and really ask a lot of questions. Like, what is your structure? I know in my lab, we met every single week. We had a 3-hour lab meeting to discuss ideas. And it was actually, it might seem like a lot of work, but it was really awesome, because my PI got to hear everyone's research every week. And he really was invested in the projects, and people could bounce ideas off of each other and talk about them and help things move forward. And there's other lab PIs who are not interested really, and they are writing grants all day. And it really depends, and they're not as invested in the project, and you might not be able to get as much guidance. And so the ideal situation would be that you would have a couple of labs that you could kind of list, but the reality is sometimes you only get one job opportunity, right? You only get one job offer. And so it's important to notice that when things are getting really toxic, if that's something that you should be still looking into staying, or you should be thinking about leaving and finding a different lab, because you can burn out really easily. And the worst thing is to be in a lab where, you know, things are happening. But on the turn event, it can also be the best experience ever. Like, it's a great family. Our lab, like, I went blueberry picking with other people in the lab over the summer. Like, we went out for happy hour after work sometimes, and I was even invited to the wedding of my mentor in the lab. And so it's all really exciting. It can be really awesome, but when it's bad, it can be really bad too. And so it's important to think about that.
Great advice. So Soo-Kyung, this one might be a little bit more for you. When you're working more at a corporation, when you're working on a project, what's the structure of how that all kind of comes together? So do you have a supervisor that's kind of watching your every move? Are you given a little bit more autonomy? What's that like for you?
So I can only speak for my company, and my team is more focused on development or sustaining existing products. So the project I'm working on is, there is an existing panel, and I'm developing a second generation of the product. So there is like a vague guideline of each stages I have to go through to get my second generation product into the market. And I would say my boss is pretty like hands-off approach. So I have like a one-on-one meeting that lasts about like 15 to 20 minutes every week. So in that meeting, I would tell him that, okay, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm planning to do, and this is what I'm having problems. Do you have any advice, or who should I reach out for getting help on this problem I'm experiencing? And he would give me guidance, and then I would do my week's worth of work, and then I'll meet him next week for updates. And if I run into more problems, I'll ask my boss for more advice.
Oh, looks like we got another one. Thank you all for your answers to that one. So pros and cons between industry versus academia. Some of you might be biased because you've chosen a certain direction, but any insight into that?
So I have never worked in a grad school lab or like academia, because I started working at Biotechne right after graduating from Calster. But from what I hear, the biggest difference is, I would say the pros of being in a corporate research lab is that you worry less about the budget, because our products make enough profit that the budget's less of a concern. Whereas from, Aman can talk about this, probably confirm this, but from what I hear is that writing like budget proposals, and that's like one of the big concerns in academia, and I never had to worry about like writing proposals or budget plans. And I think another big difference between industry and academia is that in industry, it's very profit focused almost. So if you have a project, and if you see something interesting, for example, if a certain molecule acts in a way that you didn't expect, you don't really like dig into that. You don't really ask questions like, oh, why is this happening? Instead of, you just fix the problem, move on, and continue to make the product. Instead of like asking, oh, why is this happening? What is causing this? So I guess it's more goal oriented than like answering the questions.
Yeah, so academia is definitely more like fundamental discovery based. The academia bias side of the equation that I've heard is in academia you get to answer your own questions. In industry you get to answer someone else's questions. And so, I mean, that, like, you ask anyone, they say, I want to answer my own questions, but it's more complicated than that. And so, yeah, so money is always going to be a concern. Academia is overall a little bit slower. You get a project, and unless it's totally not feasible to continue it, you are going to be on that project, and you have to figure out why something isn't working and really try and get it to work. You might spend years on it. And one other is just the pace of things, again, is a huge difference. For example, last year, I had a whole year in which my main thesis project made zero progress. And by zero, I mean absolutely zero progress. And that was failed experiment after failed experiment. In industry, as per my understanding, you would just scrap the project at that point and move to the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, so I was the work project I'm working on right now. Recently, I had like major struggles in a part of this project, and like after working on it for like a month or two without like visible progress, like my boss recommended that I scrap it and move on, because for the sake of efficiency, and it's better to use my time on something that will actually like produce results is better than trying to solve one thing for months and months that we don't even know if it's going to work. And also like the pace is definitely true that it's in corporate, it's much faster because there are a deadline for the projects, and your clients will want your product till like certain deadlines. So it's always like go, 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 like set of experiments, run, analyze. It's a much faster pace.
Great. Before I forget, if the panelists could all, whatever you're comfortable with, email, LinkedIn, if you could share your contact info in the chat. And then after you do that, I'd love if you could each just share one kind of final piece of advice that maybe you haven't gotten a chance to say yet, in regards to your career path, and maybe what you wish you would have known when you were in these students' shoes.
I can start. So when I was doing my internships in college, I was not really sure the kind of path that I wanted to take. I had an idea that I wanted to go back to school in the long run, and I'm really interested. I'm planning on applying to medical school this next year. But I kind of thought that one of the only ways to do that was kind of going through research. And a lot of people at Macalester are always talking about their research opportunities, and you might feel left out, or you might feel like, oh, you're in biology or you're in one of the hard sciences, and you think that research is the only option. And I think that I was excited to go back and do a full year of research to realize if that's truly what I was interested in. But ultimately, I realized that it's not as much of an interest to me as I maybe had thought at the beginning. And that's completely fine. I mentioned now that I'm a human services case manager for the state of Oregon. And although I just started, I really love it a lot, and I'm really enjoying it. And I think that research can be really awesome for some people, but also if you don't think it's for you, don't feel pressured to continue doing it. Because I think that like I just made a career move, and I think there's still a lot of value in things that I learned from the lab that I'm applying now to this position. Attention to detail, research skills, and just in general, that's really general, like reading papers, reading up on things, making sure things are all in place. Those are all really important skills, and I think they're really transferable. So just keep that in mind.
I can go next. So I will say two things really quickly. The first is whether it's academia or industry or anything, perseverance is very important. And so expect science to fail, and you will always be happy. And so that's just the one point. Just don't expect that it's always going to work. And the second point is the simplest advice I can give you is talk to people, ask them how they're doing, follow up, tell them what you're thinking about. You can be a badass scientist, but you still need other people to succeed. Without other people rooting for you, it's going to be a very steep climb. And Macalester has done an impressive job in developing you as a full person. And so also remember that.
I really agree with both what Gianna and Aman said. So I'd like to like combine those two. So first thing is that even if you studied or majored like biology, chemistry, and physics, that doesn't mean you have to go into lab research. Because I used to think, oh, I majored in biology, so I either go to grad school or I go to corporate lab. But that's not true. There's so many things you can do with your like biology or science major. You just have the best way is to just reach out to alums who are working in different fields who like graduated Macalester with same major you had. So after graduating, I realized that I don't have to be either research or grad school. You could be like take law classes, go to law school, or do like a consulting job or become a teacher. There's so many things you can do, especially because Macalester gives you a liberal arts education. Your career path is not limited to your major. And second thing I would like to say is that if you do choose to go to like lab bench research, perseverance is very important because science will most of the time not work the way you want it to be. But if you keep tackling and keep working on it with diligence, it'll eventually work for you.
I can't tell you how exciting it is to be working on a project and you get like the results that you wanted, or you get something unexpected and it's so positive and everyone in the lab is so excited for you, and it's extremely rewarding and it fits into your project and you're just like, yes. So I think, yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, research is really awesome.
Great. Thank you all. So students, let's give a virtual round of applause. You can use your little reaction thing. Thank you all so much for this great advice. This is super, super valuable and really good to get a variety of perspectives on things. So students, I will follow up with you with an email and all of their contact info, but they also have it in the chat, so you can pick it up there. Panelists, thank you so, so much for your time today. I know that, you know, taking an hour out of your workday is not always easy, so we appreciate it. And I hope you all are able to connect outside of this. Students, feel free, like they said, reach out to them, reach out to other alums. They want to help you. They want to talk to you. So yeah, thank you all for joining us, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.